So this is my webcam post for our final discussion week. The first question is, how does Carver build off of Cheever's ideas in Cathedral? So Cathedral is largely about, well, from what I took from it, is that it's largely about how, as a society, we are not very successful in our means of communication and understanding. And this is a disadvantage to both each other and ourselves. So we perceive blindness as a sort of impediment, right? I mean, if at any moment you were to go blind, you would have difficulty accepting that. So when a tragedy like this happens, you're sort of hindered by it. But however, this man was not blinded at a particular moment, and I assume this based on the text, the way he talks and stuff. But our narrator has already decided that he is not very fond of the blind man. He says that he's seen them on TV and the way they act and all this stuff. So he goes into detail as to why he doesn't really like him, even though he's never actually met a blind person. So he's not very comfortable around him or the idea of being around him. He thinks he's got it all figured out, and even when the blind man comes to the home, the narrator is staring at him, wondering like about him and stuff like that. Just sort of, it's like he's some object that he's never seen before. He's afraid to say certain things. He doesn't leap forward to start a conversation because he does not know how or what to talk about, and that doesn't encompass our sense of sight. He doesn't want to offend him, and he doesn't want to bring up something that would hurt the guy's feelings, When the cathedral topic finally comes up, they speak of religion, but most importantly, you realize that the problem isn't that there isn't anything to talk about, but that there is just a fault in the communication strategy. The narrator does not know how to describe the cathedrals. His descriptions are vague and hard to follow. But we know what he is talking about, and as you read it, you think of ways that you would describe the cathedral. How would you describe the cathedral to a blind man? Where would you start? Where would you stop? How would you know that your words have been understood by this man? When how would you know? There is a lack of understanding from both parties, but only one attempts to understand and learn from the other, whereas the narrator doesn't really take on that initiative. I like the way the story ends when he says, but I had my eyes closed. I thought I'd keep them that way for a little longer. I thought it was something I ought to do. Well, he said, are you looking? My eyes were still closed. I was in my house. I knew that, but I didn't feel like I was inside anything. It's really something, I said. I think that this line describes that he has understood where the blind man is coming from. He's understood, his position in life in general. From what I took of it, this blind man is not confined by anything. When it says, but I didn't feel like I was inside anything, there are no laws, there are no rules he has to follow, socially, that is. I mean, dressing a certain way, acting a certain way, social gestures, and so on. I mean, it gives you chills imagining a place where you are not confined by anything, by any social norms, where you don't have to feel like you have to act a certain way, look a certain way, dress a certain way, and all of that stuff. Because even in your own home, you're closed in. I mean, you have to be home at a certain time, I guess, when you were younger. There are things that, like, your family doesn't talk about, or if you live on your own, like, there are still rules, there are still restrictions in your household, And similarly, in Why Don't You Dance, we are at someone's yard rather than inside of the home. All of the furniture has been taken out of the house, and it's different being inside of a home than outside of it, right? I mean, when you are inside, there are rules, there are stories, there's privacy, and you feel as if no one is watching. When the young couple gets on the bed, they're worried about people seeing them, and when the man offers them a drink, they're also concerned about being seen, which makes sense. But the theme of communication is throughout the entire story, where they don't really understand why he has laid out all of his furniture outside, and neither do we as readers. We don't really learn why exactly. There's just speculation, but there really isn't a solid reason as to why he's doing this. We don't know what happened in his own life to lead him to this point, but we do know that this man is sad and suffering in his life. And the only time he seems to be relieved of this is when the couple arrives and they have a few drinks and they dance. Just like in the cathedral where they drink and smoke and sort of forget about everything else around them. And for the second question, how does Howe push back against these ideas? And how I think it deviates away from both of the other stories, because in this story, Ginsberg does not shy away with the topics he discusses. He begins by talking about these great minds of the generation that he knew, and he goes on to discuss the things they did. The alcohol, the drugs, especially the drugs. He goes into detail with all of this, and the imagery is really elaborate. You see everything that you read. He talks about them getting caught with marijuana, the psychedelic drugs, and all the things that we consider taboo, I guess. I mean, you would like to think that the greatest minds are people who are better appealing in the eyes of society, but that's not the case here. He's sort of saying that if you are normal, you're not really that great. But if you're what he describes in his story, then you're probably great, in a sense. The best people are the ones who don't obey by societal norms. They're the people who make their own rules and they live their own life, and they don't restrict themselves like other people do. Especially when he starts talking about capitalism, and he talks about how it sort of tells you what is right and what is wrong. I think that's where I got the gist of the poem and sort of the meaning, I guess. And that concludes my webcam discussion. Thanks.